Quietly and behind the scenes, Europe's debt crisis has been coalescing into a brand new storm. More bailouts, well, they're certainly in the future. Greece is going to need billions. Ireland says it needs its own credit line, and the Portuguese government is panicking over missed deadlines. And on top of all of that, there are deep reservations over Europe's proposed banking union that would ultimately hand Brussels the power to shut down any bank on the continent. Lucy Kaffanoff reports.
These days may be calmer for Europe. The April to June period saw the Eurozone come out of recession after the longest period of economic misery since records began back in 1995. But the crisis is far from over, and the cost in millions of lost jobs and economic stress remains a major concern. Economic recovery is at best fragile. Now, output from the Eurozone's factories had fallen by much more than expected in July. Unemployment remains at dramatic levels in some of the southern countries. What's more, a number of nations still are struggling to balance their finances, raising fears that more bailouts will be needed in the future. Now, while more loans have been ruled out for the moment, bailouts were still very much at the top of the agenda at the recent meeting of Eurozone ministers. So let's take a closer look at where the actual concerns lie today. Bailed out twice and still not in the clear, Greece is likely to need another 10 billion euros just in order to bolster its finances. But elections in Germany mean that help isn't likely to come anytime soon. Voters in the bloc's most powerful economy have grown tired of taxpayer-funded rescues. And problems in Greece spell trouble for Cyprus. The two countries are intricately linked by history as well as common economic grounds. Cyprus was bailed out earlier this year for some 10 billion euros, but new data shows that its economy is shrinking to the worst level since the 1970s, raising the possibility that if Greece does ask for more cash, Cyprus may not be far behind in asking for help. Now, Ireland may be exiting the bailout program at the end of the year, but the country is also in line for Eurozone aid. Now, its finance minister had suggested a credit line of 10 billion euros. This is to serve as what he calls a backstop to give confidence to investors. Moving on to Portugal, that country faces a bumpier ride. The country was set to end its bailout program in the middle of next year, but that was before parts of the rescue were actually ruled illegal. Now, officials in Lisbon must scramble to find other ways of balancing the books. And now, new worries with Slovenia falling from economic grace. Billions of euros in bad loans make the country a candidate for Eurozone bailout number 5. Now, that country has been in recession since last year, and it's been scrambling to fix its banking sector. For now, Eurozone finance ministers insist that Slovenia won't need a bailout, but the country has a long haul ahead before it's in the clear. So when it comes to improvements in the Eurozone economy, better hold off on the champagne, at least for now. Lucy Kaffanoff, RT, Moscow.
And there's little good news in the Eurozone's latest unemployment numbers. Bloc-wide joblessness has now been growing every month for the past 2.5 years, ever since Greece was given its first bailout. But now, with Angela Merkel's government about to stand the electoral test, it could be crunch time for the single currency, as RT's Laura Smith reports.
It could be make or break for the Eurozone. As the German election approaches, Europe's a region still stuck in recession with outbreaks of social unrest. And some believe the outcome of the election could be a catalyst for change. I've been speaking to Václav Klaus, the former president of the Czech Republic, at a Saxo Capital Markets conference here in London. He compares the European project to communism and says the time is now for the people of individual European countries to stand up and say the emperor has no clothes.
Well, I think that everyone who has open eyes in Europe sees that it's impossible to continue without a radical change. When I speak about radical change, I really speak about a fundamental transition, fundamental transformation, something we in our parts of Europe, in East, Central and Eastern Europe, experienced 2 decades ago. And I think that Europe has to wake up and to do the same.
And how likely is it, do you think, that that will happen, that citizens will stand up and say the emperor's got no clothes?
Well, the question is How fast, who will start it, who will organize it, but definitely it will not come from Brussels.
Klaus envisages Europe as a conglomerate of sovereign, independent nations, and he's found common ground with UKIP's Nigel Farage.
We have got 251 days until a European election that takes place across the whole of Europe. That is the opportunity politically to cause an earthquake. You know, lobbying's important, intelligent briefings are important, argumentation's important, but in the end, the thing that changes politics is the way people vote. And I think these European elections are a mega opportunity right across the continent of Europe to spark something that leads to referendums and that leads to real change.
And Farage has found recognition from a most unlikely source. Jose Manuel Barroso, the European Commission President, says UKIP could become the primary force in British politics, implying David Cameron's jumped on the bandwagon of UKIP's Euroscepticism just to win votes. Both Farage and Klaus agree the time is ripe for a fundamental decision. Should the Eurozone limp along, propped up by scaffolding, or should there be a return to an economic rationale and a Europe based on intergovernmental cooperation rather than integration?